Hi guys, and welcome back to Manch Talk. I'm your host, Carla Gericke, and hopefully, possibly, I almost pinky swear, keep my fingers crossed, this is the last of the Manch Talks, and coming in July, I will be launching my new format and new program called New Hampshire First. And the thinking there will be that we will be talking about all things New Hampshire-y, mostly from a libertarian perspective, or really even from the perspective of an independent in the great state of New Hampshire. You know, we forget because the political parties want to divide us, right? Divide and conquer is the art of politics. And so we tend to forget that here in New Hampshire, the biggest group of voters are the independents, and actually the Republicans and the Democrats each only have in the high 20% of voters, right? So I think it behooves all of us, sort of middle-class, normal people, to start to stick together. And so I will be bringing you the news from that sort of perspective. People who've been watching Manch Talk for several years know Tammy and I did the show together for 2 years, and now I am selling forth here on my own. We'll be changing up the format a little bit. I'm doing the lives, of course, here on Facebook and X, and probably expand that to YouTube over time, and then start to bring in more regular guests to talk about the issues that we care about. All right, what's happening on the show today? Your guess is as good as mine, but here are a few things I do want to talk about. There's sort of a developing scandal going on with Jeanne Shaheen, her husband, the Department of Homeland Security, the TSA, special treatment, and for folks who've been watching the show know I'm on a mission to abolish the TSA, so let's make this a talking point for the Shaheens. We'll talk a little bit about where we are with the Parental Bill of Rights, and maybe talk about it just a little bit from a philosophical perspective, because really what this Bill of Rights is trying to do is to codify the relationship between the state, the parents, and the child. And I think for those of us who think very philosophically and mindfully about self-ownership, need to really start to wonder, like, how far down this path of totalitarianism are we when the state is actually claiming ownership over your child at school, for example. And so this parental bill, I think, is a solution for a problem, but also maybe not the right one, or maybe we're not having the right conversations. The EFAs were just recently expanded. Those are the education freedom accounts. This means that more children will be able to exercise some school choice here in New Hampshire. And then I will lastly talk a little bit about the New Hampshire NH exit recent poll that came out. That's some of the independent stuff I've been working on. And then we'll wrap up with just a little teaser and reminder that PorcFest, of course, is coming up. So the news has been kind of insane, right? Like, so LA is burning down. I'm sure everyone saw the photo with the guy on the car waving the flag. I want to remind people, when you see very dramatic things on the news, you maybe, if you're seeing that photo very tightly cropped, you want to zoom out a little bit and look at the big picture. So there is that photo. I know people like Elon have shared it. I used it for an article on X. But if you zoom out, you'll notice it's one dude on a car. It's kind of like a great shot, right? Like, it's a great photojournalistic shot. But really, everyone around the guy is a journalist taking a photo of him. And so if it's going to be this sort of symbol of the riots, I think it's just also important to know that that photo I don't believe is staged, but there was no riot in his immediate area anymore. The riot had kind of gone down one way. So maybe the cautionary tale there is, if you're consuming social media in your echo chamber, you may only be getting one side of the story, and so it behooves you to really go look at what's going on in the bigger picture. So the bigger picture, of course, is yes, parts of LA are burning, but it isn't the whole city. It's not, and actually, while we're talking about that, there are questions, and here are questions you should be asking yourself. So President Trump has sent the National Guard down there. I believe he's also called in the military. And reminder, there is a law in America called the Posse Comitatus law, which says you're not allowed to deploy the U.S. military on U.S. soil. And so that's kind of like where the National Guard kind of came in. And so the question becomes, hey, can Trump do this? Does this make him a dictator? And the answer, as the answer often is a little more nuanced than the screeching heads on the internet want you to think. It is usually controversial when a president does it, but presidents have done it in the past, including Eisenhower back in the 60s to do the 50s or 60s, I think, to do the first school civil rights deployments. They did use National Guard and there. And then under Bush, I'm going to guess senior, I don't actually remember which one, also did it. So that, says it has been done before. Should we just be like, oh, it's great because Trump's doing it, or oh, it's terrible because Trump's doing it? Neither of those things. We should be looking at it like, is this legal to do in America? And if so, what are sort of the restraints we should be putting on this, and what should we be worrying about? And I will tell you guys, I think what we should be worrying about is a emerging technocracy, because my feed is just full of hateful rhetoric, and and some of these are people I know where I'm just like, yo, your personality totally changed in 2 years. What does that say about you? Does that say you're susceptible to propaganda? Does it say you're just playing a game for clout? Does it say someone has dialed you up so badly that you aren't functioning as a compassionate human anymore? And if so, why? And qui bono, who benefits, right? So you'll see everyone celebrating oh, this immigrant this TikTok influencer was the one I saw this morning, got caught by ICE and is going to be deported. Okay. And I'm like, okay, I know nothing about this particular gentleman. No idea what his story is. Maybe he's a dirtbag, possible, not possible. My question is just, how are they suddenly finding people at airports who are traveling and locking them down at airports? And is this something we should be concerned about? I believe it is, because I think there's something weird going on with the Real ID stuff. This kind of came out of the blue. No one's talking about it. And there are privacy concerns that have been there since the start, which is the reason why New Hampshire does not have a compulsory Real ID Act. We didn't comply back then. You can get it. It's voluntary, but you can opt out, and I recommend you do, and get a passport. Everyone should have a passport so that you have options in life. So they popped this guy, and I think we need to start wondering, what is the Palantir / Leidos, is some name I'm starting to hear. Who are these contractors? I mean, we know who they are. They're our billionaire buddies, right? But who are they, and kind of what is this technocracy that we are slowly, quietly ushering in? I mean, I might be so cynical as to suggest that the little the girls are fighting between Elon and Trump was like a diversionary tactic while some of these other troubling things happened. All right, so keeping in the theme of the airport, let's talk about this Jeanne Shaheen scandal. So there was a recent Department of Homeland Security report that sparked a scandal involving New Hampshire's Senator Jeanne Shaheen and her husband William Billy Shaheen, alleging misuse of political influence to manipulate the TSA watch listing protocols. So basically what happened was her husband William was traveling with other attorneys. I believe this was like maybe a Lebanese civil human rights attorney or something. Anyway, he was traveling with someone who was sus enough to be on some government list. Now, to be fair, most of those government lists are junk. So it's not to say, like, let's treat people as if they're innocent until proven guilty, because certainly the TSA likes to treat me like me and my private parts are guilty. So he was traveling with this other person who was flagged, and so somehow he got caught up in it. But then Jeanne Shaheen used her political influence to be like, no, the laws don't apply to my husband, see, because I'm special. I am the political class, and we have special rules for us that don't apply to you plebes. No, people like Carla, she has to have her body molested with the back of their hands. So this happened like a week ago. So this is in June, and basically they had gone around the protocols back in 2023. So the allegations center on the TSA's Quiet Skies program. Yep, you know, Orwell is here, guys. There are all kinds of pretty names for everything they're doing. But the Quiet Skies is a surveillance initiative that subjects certain travelers to enhanced screening and monitoring, often based on travel patterns or associations. The DHS claims the Biden administration's TSA, under then Administrator David Pekoski, politicized this program, granting exemptions to politically connected individuals like William Shaheen, while targeting others, like there was the case with Tulsi Gabbard. And so this is political favoritism. This is something that America is supposed to be above and beyond, although really, to be honest, all America did more successfully than the corrupt other parts of the world is export their fiat currency, and we're coming to the end of that empire, whether we want to admit it or not. And then actually the story we tell here in America, the marketing, the narrative, the perception, as opposed to reality, is done really well here. What do I mean by that? In the rest of the world, we call lobbyists what they are: corrupt people bribing politicians. What do we do in America? We call them K Street. We give them special badges. We just say this is how it's done. We give it a really nice little name like lobbying, and everyone's happy. But don't forget, what is really happening is it's a bunch of corrupt people doing corrupt things, because if you go to the top, you can influence more things more faster. So we should go to the top with Trump and be like, hey, one of our libertarian issues for the midterms is abolish the TSA. What would we replace it with, Carla? Oh no, will the terrorists win? Will we all die? Will things explode? Probably not. You know why? Because it hasn't over the past 25 years since we've had these clowns there. And they fail 90 to 95% of their own internal tests. So, you know, I think if there were all these incredibly evil people out there trying to take down everything, maybe it would have happened by now. And maybe the magic trick that statists play on your mind is that they make you scared of things that aren't real. All right, so with this emerging scandal over here, it's clear that it was an abuse of power. It's inconsistent application of security protocols. So if you want security theater, then the security theater has to be the same for everyone. Otherwise, the theater is a little too obvious. There's obviously a lack of transparency here. This only came out after a DHS report, after we had a political switch. And it's a bypassing of the standard procedures that the rest of us have to go through. So I think this could be a good sort of wedge little issue that we can use. So maybe people can start asking questions about this. I don't believe Shaheen is running again. I think her daughter might be. I need to look into all of that. I haven't kept up on who's doing what. But a reminder, there is an abolish the TSA bill that has been submitted. It was introduced by Senators Mike Lee from Utah and Tommy Tuberville from Alabama in March, late March this year. And it proposes dismantling the TSA, yes please, and replacing it with privatized security. Now I want you guys to go on a little brain adventure with me for a hot second. So when I say the government's too big and we're over-regulated and the free market would be better, here's what I want you to think about. Imagine we actually had a free market in air travel. What would that look like? That would mean there would be many more different small airports accommodating many different size airplanes. There has actually been a reduction in pilots in America from its zenith at its height in the 80s. We have 50% less pilots now than we did. So if we actually liberalize the market, you would also start to see more pilots and more people doing these kinds of jobs. Here in New Hampshire, we have aviation parks. It might be like 6, 8, 10 houses that have a piece of land. They all build their own places. They have a short runway. They have little 2 or 4 or 6 seaters, Cessnas, those kinds of things going in and out. Now imagine that guy who's flying to, I don't know, Colorado on next Tuesday. And he's like, hey, here's an app. You can go on the app, and if you want to fly to this town in Colorado on this day, let me know. It's going to be X amount. And when he fills his plane with 4 people, then they fly. Now imagine there's another airline. Maybe we call it 420 Skies, High Skies. I don't know, right? And it's an airline that lets you smoke weed on the plane. Who knows? You could have family-only airlines so that all the babies can scream together and the rest of us don't have to listen to it. You could have adult-only airlines. You could have really cheap ones that run like buses that are kind of like whatever Spirit or whatever the one that's going around now is, right? So what I'm saying is, when we talk about the government being in the way, what they are literally doing is they're making everything worse. They're making everything more expensive. And I can prove it to you because the places where the government is not heavily involved, which used to be big tech, but unfortunately now, you know, that little marriage happened and that fascism is merrily going on. Big Bro is over there cooking up all kinds of crap for us. But the regulations make it too hard. It makes the barriers to entry too hard. It becomes really expensive. So let's say maybe you're like, I think I'd be a good pilot, but let me go try it. Because of the way regulations are, your classes might cost $100,000, but if we had an unregulated market, it probably costs like $6,000. You would have different competing things. You would have different competing security levels. So you could have, you know, well, obviously the billionaires are all, and Greta are all on their private jets, right? Anyone who's against or advocating for climate change has a private jet. And you should probably wonder about that little hypocrisy circle too. But my point is, when I say abolish the TSA, I'm not necessarily saying don't have any security. I'm just saying tailor your security to personal preferences instead of this one-size-fits-all, blue gloves, gate rape, favoritism if you're if you know the right people set up, and just let the market provide. And that is actually also what we mean as libertarians when we say school choice is important. Why? Because competition makes things better because now you're like, oh, I actually got to bring my A game. And the bad teachers, the ones who are in the newspaper every week now for molesting people, teaching them weird things, doing strange stuff, that whole YDC thing, which I haven't talked about in weeks. You get rid of those people, which the system currently protects, and you let the best rise. And maybe you're a bad teacher because that's not really your calling. Maybe there's something else you need to go do. So we need to get back to these principles of the free market. We need to get back to the idea of privatizing everything, because when you privatize things, you actually allow more people to prosper. All right, that's my little tirade on the TSA for today. What else did I say we were going to talk about? All right, I do want to mention this poll that just came out. So 2 years ago, we commissioned a poll to sort of get the bead, I guess, on where Granite Staters are on secession, on independence, what would that look like? And so we recently, just yesterday, I got the new University of New Hampshire survey, Granite State poll report, Nexit, for April this year. So it is a significant thing, and I will break it down in more concrete terms in the weeks to come. But I did want to mention a few things that I found interesting. Everyone supports people doing radical things over there, right? So interestingly, there is very much higher support for, say, California to secede first than New Hampshire. So it's not so much that people are against the idea. I think they're against the idea for going first. Now, I've been playing a lot with the AI tools, and I actually had, I think it was Grok, and then I ran it through ChatGPT. I like to punt them against each other just to make sure they're not lying. Sometimes they get a little creative, so you should always be vetting what the robots are telling you. So I actually ran the argument why New Hampshire would be able to declare independence through it, and both AIs were like, yep, you're right, because our New Hampshire Constitution predates the U.S. Constitution by 2 years, and our original Constitution has the right of revolution in it, which says we ought to reform our government when it gets too rotten. And so, yes, I'm often early on things, but I'm telling you guys, this idea for New Hampshire is a winning idea, and we're gonna do it. It might take a little longer. But if you are paying attention, 2 years ago, actually last year, we put in a bill that said if the U.S. national debt reaches $40 trillion, then we will put in a constitutional amendment to let the Granite Staters, the voters of the Granite State, vote to decide if they want independence. So again, the important part here is no one's telling anyone what to do. We're going to put the question to Granite Staters, and they will decide. And I will tell you when they will decide it's a good idea. Either when another state has done it, or when the dollar collapses. And, you know, under Trump in the first term, people don't like it when I say it, but it's the truth. We printed $6 trillion plus dollars. That money went all over. That money has caused your eggs to be more expensive. They are doing it again in the big, beautiful bill, the BBB, and you might want to throw an S at the end of that, bill. And they are talking about trillions and trillions. I believe it's up to 5 trillion again. And this cannot sustain. So in this poll, people were like, hey, okay, 40 trillion seemed low, but you know, if you get to 50 trillion, we're interested. So currently, there's only about 12% of the respondents. There were about 1,200 respondents. These are people who are on the survey lists at UNH. Only 12% currently immediately support secession. I actually think that's a great number, and that's a good base to build from. It definitely appeals more to self-identified libertarians. Interestingly enough, although not surprising, the idea appeals more to new residents to New Hampshire, so people who have lived here for less than 20 years like the idea more. People who listen to Joe Rogan, big surprise, are a vocal advocacy group for this group. It became clear from the survey that, yes, the federal debt is a really good issue for us to use as a catalyst. And framing things as this pitting of the federal government against state rights, and to bring it full circle to where we started this conversation with Trump and calling in the military to LA, to these areas. I saw their protest plan for this weekend. I believe it's called like No Kings. I find all of this framing and so interesting, really, because no one seems to be really identifying the problems correctly, but a lot of people are being heavily manipulated. And we are seeing the reality that many of us on the tech legal side of things have been talking about for a long time, which is social media has now become a very dangerous physical mobilization tool. And that's interesting because that is a brand new thing in the arena of sort of decentralized power plays or power conflicts. So framing secession as against, overreach, federal overreach, and then highlight California secession to support California's secession support to normalize the conversation of independence. Anyway, those are some of the sort of general things that came out of that. I will dive into it in more detail, but here with the last minute or two of the show, I did want to remind everyone that PorcFest is coming up. That is the 22nd annual Porcupine Freedom Festival. It will be taking place at Rogers Campground up in Lancaster starting next week. I'll be up there from Monday. On Tuesday, I think I'm actually doing the opening speech, which will be the Good Girl's Guide to Self-Ownership. I'll talk a little bit about the framing of how I think each of us can embrace more autonomy in our own lives. That'll be followed by a speech by Joel Salatin, food freedom advocate, polyphase farmer, super cool dude. I hope everyone is coming up for the whole week. So we'll be there from Monday through Saturday night when we're all exhausted and tired with Soapbox Idol. Also on Saturday, 1 p.m., Ross Ulbricht, the founder of Silk Road, pardoned by President Trump. He will be giving a keynote speech talking about maybe his ideas for the future, and then come meet the community and all of that good stuff. And it should be a fantastic festival for the whole week. We are expecting, as we always do, thousands of people, both the family and the community here in New Hampshire, and then hundreds, if not thousands, of people from out of state coming to explore our wonderful backyard. I hope everyone knows and understands how truly lucky we are up here in New Hampshire to be able to live in such a beautiful state that is safe, where the quality of living's good, where we have water, where life is good, and we should appreciate that. So I will leave you guys on that positive note. And remember, live free and thrive.